This is my third time recording this and my throat is really dry, so I'm sorry if it sounds like shit, but I'm just going to keep trying anyways. I just watched Joey Bizinger, otherwise known as the Anime Man, talk about philosophy and how people critiqued him for being privileged, and for being pretentious. As a response, I wanted to make this video to tackle this issue of anti-intellectualism that's so prevalent amongst people my age, Gen Z, and younger people online. Stoicism and Broicism. As many have done in recent years, including myself, Joey's dived into philosophy, which is an incredibly broad field of study that is fantastic. I love philosophy. He started, like many people, with Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a fantastic book on Stoicism and basic philosophy. However, the response from younger fans of Trash Taste and Joey was met with what I call the epitome of sardonic 2020s Gen Z humor, making everything into a backhanded joke rather than genuinely indulging in something that's new, that's esoteric. Joey makes a great point by saying that he loves delving into new things, and that's why he has so many hobbies, from YouTube to music to clothing design to now philosophy. Joey enjoys all of these things equally, and I myself am the same way, as I have way too many fucking hobbies to indulge in, and I consider myself a polymath. My career aspirations are in medicine and science, since I want to be a neurosurgeon. Also, I love video games, anime and TV, movies, philosophy and classic literature, writing, linguistics and languages, since yo hablo un poquito español y je parle un peu de français, and physics, chemistry, and engineering and technology. I'd say I can have an in-depth conversation about any of these topics to a moderately high level, whilst not having exactly mastered any one of these. You know, jack of all trades, master of none. So, I've read parts of Meditations, and I believe it's a genuinely far better book than what mainstream Stoicism and what people colloquially understand as Broicism tells you. Rather than what Broicism says, which is suppressing all emotions and being this stoic, cold person, Stoicism is a form of controlled emotional expression that allows you to master yourself while also being an active participant in society. Broicism has been appropriated by the alt-right and red pill communities, but genuine Stoicism is the complete opposite, and I think that's part of where the confusion comes in. People assume Stoicism and philosophy are just Broicism, tools by the toxic masculine alt-right to rationalize and justify their bad behavior. A great example of Broicism and toxic masculinity is Andrew Tate, the father of the modern alt-right. He quotes Stoic philosophy from time to time, but lives in complete juxtaposition to it. A main component of Stoicism is temperance and control, to not fully live for things like pleasure, power, money, or image. But, as one may guess, Andrew Tate is the living embodiment of what Stoicism isn't. He is purely hedonistic and vain, and has an insecure need for control over others and his image. He wants to be seen as the quote top G, and as the top dog and alpha male by everyone, otherwise he lashes out violently. He controls people's finances and psychology and physically abuses, traffics, and rapes women and forces them into his camgirl service that earned him millions. He also manipulates his young, impressionable male audience into thinking that they are just one step away from being him. All they have to do is buy his course at Hustleversity. Jesus fucking Christ, just saying that word Hustleversity makes me puke in my own mouth. And learn basic drop shipping skills that you can learn online for free and in a market drop shipping that's been dead for 10 years. Yeah, he's not exactly the best role model for young men to look up to, and his impact has been felt by the younger generations. As a result of Tate and his successors like Sneeko or Clavicular, people are misguided by what Stoic philosophy is, and as a result, what philosophy as a whole is. This counterphobic reaction to the alt-right is disdain and sardonic humor that copes and critiques with broad strokes rather than pinpointing the issue itself. What is anti-intellectualism? I think another reason why young people are so resistant to the idea of philosophy is because of the rise in anti-intellectualism. Now, let's break down that big, scary buzzword that's been thrown around, anti-intellectualism. The resistance towards intellectual pursuits, typically in higher education like science, philosophy, literature, math, medicine, etc. Anti-intellectualism also distrusts these intellectuals and people who are seen as intellectual, such as scientists, philosophers, authors, doctors, lawyers, mathematicians, and most people with a higher education, like a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate. It's often a populist response, seeing the ivory tower intellectual elite as the ones controlling and ruining society, and that the gruff, poor proletarians and lower classes need to overthrow or at the very least shame this intellectual elite. This is commonly found in communist and fascist societies. An example I'll use here is the USSR planting Trofim Lysenko at the forefront of biology and agricultural development. Lysenko had a wild array of pseudoscientific and anti-scientific beliefs. But, since he was the man in charge of agriculture in the Soviet Union, no one could question him without being arrested, deported, or disappeared. Hold on, I gotta sneeze. Alright, I just sneezed. As a result of Lysenkoism, the USSR weaponized his pseudoscience to engineer famines and genocides like the Holodomor against Ukraine, Lysenko's own home country. A more recent example of anti-intellectualism gaining power due to populist rhetoric is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the head of the HHS in the United States. RFK Jr. is pretty much the leading spokesperson for anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, and he uses his power and weaponizes his rhetoric to destroy intellectual institutions like universities and regulatory bodies such as the FDA and CDC. As a result, many southern and midwestern states are experiencing an epidemic of previously maintained diseases like measles due to the lowered rates of vaccination. Why is this significant? How does anti-science rhetoric lead people to being anti-philosophy? Well, they're inherently intertwined in my eyes with anti-intellectualism, because if one pillar of intellect and knowledge falls, the rest follow like dominoes. Universities across the US are having their funds slashed across all fields, not just the evil vaccine science. Terence Tao, the prodigy mathematician and professor at UCLA, had his department slashed in the Trump administration's budget cuts, despite the fact that abstract and pure math have nothing to do with anti-vax fear and rhetoric. This just goes to show the extent of the beast that is anti-intellectualism as it spreads its arms and tentacles into every crevice of higher education and intellectualism. Anglocentrism and the internet. But again, why is this significant? What connection does this have to Joey, an Australian-Japanese man who lives across the world? Well, internet culture is overwhelmingly American-centric. That is a fact, not an opinion. Popular culture on the internet spawns from America and spreads like wildfire across the world. English as the dominant language in America and the international auxiliary language permeates into internet culture and attitudes. As a result, American culture permeates into internet culture and attitudes, and as we've seen during the past 10 years with Trumpism becoming more and more mainstream, the rise of right-wing populism and anti-intellectualism then permeates into internet culture and attitudes. The repetition is intentional, by the way. This includes people from all around the political spectrum, by the way, not just the right wing. No one is immune to the beast of anti-intellectualism. While the left often touts itself as being intellectually superior to the right, many leftists and liberals often miss their own anti-intellectualism, groupthink, and dogmatic idiosyncrasies, especially in more niche leftist circles that sprout away from liberalism, such as, communist, socialist, and anarchist circles. I probably lost a good chunk of those people with my critique of the USSR because I acknowledged the Holodomor as a genocide, and I critiqued Stalinism and Lysenkoism, which they, for some reason, idolize. Regardless, the issue at hand is anti-intellectualism, which, as I mentioned, is a populist, apolitical fear response to the rise in institutional power grabs and political instability. Ageism within Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Another argument, which I think is even more reductionist than the previous ones, are that he's quote-unquote unk, or old, and or he's going through a midlife crisis. These ones, while seemingly appearing as silly memes, do reveal a deeper-seated sense of ageism that is common amongst people my age and even younger, towards those who aren't that much older than them. I myself am only 20 years old, which, considering how many dinosaur memes I've seen with people whose birthdays are in the 2000s, is pretty ancient on the internet, since the median age is and always has been like 10 to 14 years old. It's both funny and kind of fascinating how I, a 20-year-old kid, have more in common with Joey, a 30-something-year-old adult, who's quote-unquote unk, rather than people my own age or even slightly younger, like 16 to 20, simply because we both enjoy philosophy and we get criticized by these people. And, as Joey mentioned, because people don't understand or know what philosophy even is, their immediate response is to just poke fun at the person and at the topic as a whole, with defensive jokes that really only serve to preserve your ego. It's the mentality of, if I don't understand it, then it's stupid and you're old and you're washed and you're unk and you're going through a midlife crisis. The continuous ands and run-ons are intentional, by the way. It just captures that Gen Z speak. Modern segregation in American schools. I think another core of anti-intellectualism that I brushed upon previously is the erosion of institutions, and in this case, K-12 education, and this segregated divide in K-12 education in the US between the average students and the quote-unquote smart or advanced students. For those who aren't familiar with US education, it is segregated, and I use that word intentionally, between the average run-of-the-mill education, which is pretty subpar, since especially in rural areas, they still teach bullshit like creationism, and the advanced placement students like AP, honors, international baccalaureate, etc. I myself went to a primarily Hispanic elementary school that didn't have any advanced classes. Meanwhile, other elementary schools had the gifted and talented education experience, the GATE program. However, I myself was a quote gifted kid who quickly absorbed information and understood it far beyond my peers, and I still consider myself that type of person now. That's not me bragging, that's just me being honest and being blunt. As a result, I was ostracized and outcast by my own peers for being intellectually superior to them, whilst being socially different due to my actual diagnosed autism. That's another buzzword that I'll tackle in another video. When I went to middle and high school, I took all the AP and honors classes I could, since the normal classes were incredibly boring and slow-paced compared to the normal classes. Guess what? Most of my classmates then were white and Asian, the more privileged groups in America, objectively speaking. It's not an opinion, it's a fact to say that white and East Asian students are far more privileged economically and scholastically compared to Black and Hispanic students. This segregation then permeates into the school system as a whole, where some advanced classes are almost exclusively white and Asian, with a couple outliers. I'm not saying that Black and Hispanic students are quote-unquote dumber or quote less capable than their white and Asian counterparts. Quite the contrary, actually. I'm saying that the entire school system is segregated against Black and brown students and pits kids between different ethnicities against each other, which creates rivalries, resentment, and inferiority complexes, as well as superiority complexes. Why am I bringing this up again? I think this system is intentionally designed to dumb down underprivileged groups of people, where they are racially and economically disadvantaged. You have to pay hundreds of dollars for SAT prep classes and hundreds of dollars for the SAT test, as well as AP tests, just for a chance to pass, which already just favors richer and more economically savvy kids. As a result, this creates a counterphobic and counterculture attitude for millions of students across the United States who seek towards the internet as a refuge and participate in online internet popular culture. See how this is all coming together now? These kids who have been racially, scholastically, and economically oppressed see intellectualism as another form of oppression. They've grown to resent learning, resent school, and resent those who do better than them. Thus, when they see their favorite YouTuber participating in what they see as oppressive behavior, subconsciously their first instinct is to react counterphobically. They attack what they fear, and defend their egos and self-perception. Now, one may argue that I'm making an incredibly broad statement here, that I'm generalizing entire groups of people just to justify my point. And honestly, they'd be right, but I don't think I'm necessarily wrong either. I'm no psychologist or sociologist. I can't make a study and prove this. I'm just some guy in his room making assumptions. So, at the end of the day, what does this all mean? How should I conclude this? Why does this even matter? I believe this is the root of Joey's issue with younger people being so reactionary towards his newfound love of philosophy, and it's quite a shame. It's just this kind of virtue signaling that I think is pretty bullshit. It's this holier-than-thou attitude that is really stupid of, oh, you're reading philosophy? Well, you're an intellectual elite and you're privileged. I think that's a really reductionist and stupid argument, because if we're going to stoop down to that level, then aren't you privileged for owning a smartphone and for typing comments away on the internet? Millions of people around the world don't have smartphones. I know this is the whole communism is when no smartphone argument, but I think it applies here just to point out the hypocrisy and stupidity of this argument. I don't think it's necessarily productive to critique people based on their privilege in this way, especially because, I mean, Joey is far closer to any of his audience members than he is to the real privileged elites like a billionaire or soon to be trillionaires. It's just a bad faith argument that buying a $10 book from Barnes & Noble, or better yet, reading a free PDF online that anyone can do, is somehow this detached ivory tower privilege that these idiots think it is. I think it's a bad faith argument, as I just said, and it's just meant to tout yourself as a holier than thou kind of person and to sneer your nose down on people who are just dipping their toes into a new intellectual endeavor. Overall, I think Joey's video brings up a real issue in anti-intellectualism and invites discussion about why young people are so resistant to a YouTuber simply indulging in philosophy. This is not even him trying to philosophize to others and express how smart he thinks he is. He's not Jordan Peterson. He's simply just saying that he read Meditations and he loved it and wanted to read more. He's not trying to be your philosophy professor telling you how to think. He's not questioning, well, what do you mean by believe? So I think the reductionist attitude from my peers towards older people learning philosophy is 1, stupid, and 2, quite a dangerous slippery slope that's enacting itself in real time within the US, which, not to sound like an American exceptionalist, but that does in fact affect the rest of the world, especially with the interconnectivity of the internet. Oh, that's a mouthful. So, overall, that's my thesis. I'm done here. I'm tired. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.